Hey guys, welcome to another video. 23rd of December here, so this is probably going to be my last video for the year. I'll take a little bit of a break and then start up again after the new year. And for this one, I just wanted to show off how I track my work when I'm cutting on a project. So whether I'm cutting on a short film or it's a larger, primetime TV series that I get to cut on, this is how I'll go about tracking the edit as I go and how I'll relay that information over to showrunners or a director or, whatever else. I use a spreadsheet that I've custom made and put together. And for our editor tier subscribers, I'll make this spreadsheet available to you guys to, tweak and, customize to your own projects so you can use it. So, without further ado, let's take a look. So, here's a completed one that I did for a project called Whistle My Lad. Now, Whistle My Lad was a 4-part series that was initially shot as a short film that was a bit long, and the company had some issues, in the making of it with some of the creators back in the day because it was shot years ago. But they thought that there was something good there in the footage, and they wanted to revive it. So they sent me the footage, and we, after a whole bunch of discussion, we revived it as a sort of limited series in 4 parts. So that'll be coming on the Page Break Productions YouTube channel soon. So if you're interested, that's where that'll be. So over here, we've got everything tracked as it's coming in. So I'll start from left to right. So on the left here, we've got the hard drive that it came in, because as I said, this was a short film that was shot years prior, and they had this across different drives and all sorts of things. And so I would log what drive it was, and I tried to two-tone color this just to separate the different drives. The shoot day that it was initially shot on, and the date. You see, I did this, was it this year? In 2022? I think it was 2022 I cut this. This was shot in 2013, so a good number of years after. I've got the reel, the camera, codec, and resolution. These are all drop-down menus, so I can select, because this is from a template that I use and I add to after each project. So, I can select from a number of cameras and codecs and resolutions. And if the piece of data that I need to enter isn't already here in the drop-down menu, I can quickly and easily add it. Color bit depth as well. I like to have that information there. Now, again, this is all shot in RAW, which is just total overkill for what it was, but I think the director of it initially just had this thing about shooting in RAW and just getting the best quality. For future reference, if you're shooting short films or anything like that, ProRes 444 is perfectly adequate. Unless if it's your beauty shot or for like a specific shot that you really want to capture dynamic lighting or things like that, by all means, go and shoot RAW. Go for your life. But there's no need to shoot your entire project on RAW unless you just want to use an absolute crap ton of storage. We've got our frame rate, of course, and the number of clips. Now I've broke this down per reel. So a reel is over there. How many clips were on each reel? And this can be quite useful later on. I kind of go by a philosophy that my maths teacher taught me in school about, when you're calculating all the angles of a shape, and you should only need to calculate, say, 2 to be able to get the one that you're trying to and ultimately get to answer the query. But if you calculate all the other ones as well, then it can help you. You never know what piece of data will prove useful later on. So if you can collate as much of it as you can, you're just in a much better position, because you never know what you're going to be asked and when and what's going to prove useful. So as data's coming in, as it first gets presented from you, if you can log it in a way that's clear, you'll be better, better positioned later on to answer queries and help people out. Going along here, I had also tracked the file size of each reel. This is of the source footage. And the duration of it once it's on a timeline. Now you'll see the headers here of all these categories change color from this point, and that just basically means that from here to get this information and to note it, I've brought it into Avid. So this is on initially getting the footage, and it's in the edit. So from here, we've got calculating the duration of the reel, and then we're tracking progress. So I've got a whole bunch of checkboxes here. Transcoded, ingested, synced, done a dupe test. If you've used the AE100 series, then you know what that is. Scene bins are done. Scenes that were in that shoot day, whether the scenes have been assembled or not, I've done the initial assembly edit, and dailies are exported. They should probably be the other way around, since that's not the order that happens in, but holy hell. I've also noted down what LUT I used on the transcode, and yeah, that was the one that worked. And then any notes or issues, which initially for this project, these ones here that came on a separate drive because they were missing from the initial drive, and I got them to send it again, but then they only had ProRes 422, standard 422, proxies available, and they were 2K, whereas it was initially shot in 5.5. You know, later on in the online, we did manage to source from the original cinematographer in 2013, still had a backup of the source footage. It just goes to show that, you know, essentially you need your backups. If you ever are directing or shooting a short film, try to always use the 3-2-1 rule, and that is that you want 3 backups of your brushes, your most important media. You want 3 backups in at least 2 different places, and at least one of them off-site. And that's sort of the golden standard rule that will keep you right. If you follow that at all times, and you're using secure copies, you're not just, you know, copy paste. You're using something like you know, Shotbit Pro, Carbon Copy Cloner, even DaVinci Resolve has a, you know, secure copy built into it now, since one of Resolve's primary uses these days is for DITs and transcoding and backups, so that's built in there too. But yeah, use your backups. You'll have noticed as well that I'm using numbers. If you're not familiar, that is Apple's equivalent to Microsoft Excel. The only reason that I use this is because, you know, it comes with my Mac, and I don't, you know, really need anything additional that is in the Microsoft Office suite, so I don't see the point in paying for it and buying it. You know, why pay money when you don't have to? Because as far as the quality and everything you can do with Apple's Office suite, I would say it's not quite at Microsoft Office's level, but I don't need that level of functionality. And it's definitely, for me, sits a good bit above Google's Office, Google Docs, and their whole system. And, you know, and like Google Docs, I can also hit collaboration, and I can share this, you know, as a live spreadsheet or document, you know, in the other applications, with people to use. And just like Google, you need a Google account, this you'll just need an Apple account, and you can use it in a web browser or whatever else. And so this is what I would do all the way through the project. I would have this spreadsheet be updating as I go, you know, whether I've got the stuff assembled, you know, dailies are updated, whatever else. I'll have this be updated as I go. And then the directors or whoever else on the project can see that, and they can always see my progress. They can see where I'm at, and they can click on links to things, and they can ask me questions, and I can show them notes of stuff fairly quickly, all in one sort of centralized place. So I would have this password protected and shared with, you know, only who needs it. But unlike all the documents and stuff that you will get from set, that can be very useful. This is geared and tailored to specifically what I find useful and, you know, the type of information I'm most likely to look up and need to know. But that covers the first tab. Nothing really much more to say here, except I had done some totals of everything down the bottom. So the total for this project had, you know, 6 hours and 16 minutes and 40 seconds worth of footage. But 1.2 terabytes of data and 330 clips. Whoop-de-doo. I mean, that part's not too essential. I just like to play a little game with my short film collaborators where they kind of guess the answer to the totals at the end of the project, and they're never remotely close. Yeah. But let's take a look at the next tab. So next up, we've got a scene breakdown. So This was before we knew that we were going to split it up into 4 parts, and it's just all the scenes in the initial script for Whistle My Lad. So we have, scenes 1 to 31. I note down whether they are interior or exterior, and the location, and then a brief description of each scene. And now this isn't necessarily something that I've got from any documentation they've sent me. All of these descriptions that I've typed out myself. It can take a little bit of time to set up at the start, especially if it's a longer project. But if you've typed out the description, then it's a description. Then it's a short description that makes the most sense to you, and you'll be able to mentally associate that with that chunk of the film very quickly, and understand the notes, which could be over to the right. So I'll have a tick box of whether I've assembled that scene, and I'll have a link to where you can watch the dailies of that scene. I don't always do this. This is more for short films and my indie projects, where I'll upload them to a service like Frame.io, or maybe even just Dropbox or iCloud or something, just somewhere where somewhere secure that they can see the dailies for that scene, if they want to look at this footage and look for something. Maybe we're working remotely and they're not sure about a shot that I've used, and they want to look to see if there's what else they have. They don't necessarily need to have a session with me and we go through that. They're more than welcome to look through the footage themselves and then tell me, oh yeah, I found this. Can you take a look at this shot and tell me what you think? What does it look like in the edit? And I can do that. But this is also just a sort of good reference for you to see and track the story and and see all the scenes, and it's handy to tick these as you've assembled and then see what's not ticked. I can hear somebody may be thinking that if you've got a scene missing, then it's kind of obvious. It isn't always. Trust me, there's some scenes, and it's actually good for an editor to know that if there's a scene that's been missed and sent to you and it's not necessarily obvious, then maybe that scene doesn't actually need to be there. And the final tab here, as I've got, is Frame.io links. So it doesn't necessarily need to be Frame.io. This will just be links to cuts. So this is how I've liked to work for the past few years. I cut a drama action film, NORTHSPUR, this way, a few short films and other projects. And basically whenever I had a new cut to show, the directors or runners or whatever, I would just type out some details here, like say first full program assembly, or director's cut 2022 12/23, since I use date versioning, and then they know what the deal is with that one, and a link. Now these links will be password protected, and the password will be a password that we've agreed upon at the beginning of the project, and I'll always just keep a project password for the directors, and then if we're inviting other people in, then they can have their own links that are a different password. But it also means that whenever I have a new upload, I can just point them to this spreadsheet and just say, oh yeah, there's a new upload on the spreadsheet, and they'll just go and check the spreadsheet, find the details here, and click on the link. And that way you don't always need to worry about sending out links and emails and stuff that can be intercepted. If you have a shared spreadsheet that is secure and you're comfortable that it's got its own unique password just to the spreadsheet, then you can just say that it's been updated, there's a new link there. And I'll always note down the durations here as well the file name of the file that I've uploaded and the date I've uploaded it. The durations particularly I find quite useful because you can sort of track as your cut, particularly after the assembly goes on, you can track how the duration changes. So ideally it should be coming down. For example, NORTHSPUR ended up being about 90 minutes in the end, and the initial edit, I think the first assembly was about 3 hours 30, which is pretty common, that's fine, most scripts have a lot of fluff, and with your initial assembly, you don't want to be too experimental. You don't want to try out too many things before your director's seen it. So it does help to just stick to the script. You can call it an assembly, or you can call it like a continuity edit, or you're just cutting everything together as per the script. And when you do that, and you're being careful not to put anything out, and you're leaving time for everything, it will probably be over. In fact, a lot of feature films, their initial assembly can be like 5+ hours. I've seen it in some magazines actually, like report it like it's a story. Like they've heard member of the crew mention that, initial cut of this film was 6 hours long. And I'm like, yeah, big deal. Of course it was. No big deal. Get the same thing when they talk about reshoots, as if a film's in trouble because it's reshoots. Almost every film has reshoots. Could be for any reason. That's fine. Anyway, getting off on a tangent here. But yeah, that's sort of, it gives you an idea of how I go about tracking the edit. And a lot of this information does come in very useful, and like you can go back and reference stuff, and point directly to stuff for an editor. And it's also really useful, like when the edit's done and you're transferring to online. Online guys love this stuff, because they're going to link back to the source, and line everything up, and they want to know all the details about the color bit depth and the resolution and what they've got to work with. And so you could send this to them ahead of time before you've actually sent them the cut. And oh man, they love that. They love this level of detail, and knowing what they're about to receive. And then they can prepare for it and make sure there's enough storage space ready and whatever else. So yeah. And it always helps to get in good graces of the department that comes before you and the department that comes after you. Just as a random general little bit of advice. Now, just as a sneak peek, I'm going to try. I don't actually know if I have it, and if I don't, I'll just edit this part out. But if I do have it, then I'll show you. I'm going to try and find the one of these that I did for NORTHSPUR. Hey, here we go. NORTHSPUR data sheet. So this is what we used for the full film. So you can see the totals for this one are considerably higher. So we're looking at 14 terabytes worth of stuff, about 50 hours shooting material, and about 1,700 clips. 21 shoot days, and we had a few drone days towards the end, which I didn't bother tracking too much because they just kind of sent to me in a mad huddle, and they were well into the shoot. So I just noted the amount of clips and the file size and the duration, just what I could throw in quickly. Now, this was a feature film that was nationally funded in New Zealand, but didn't have like a lot of budget, so there was no assistant editor. Their continuity person was an actor, so he wasn't really used to the role, and we weren't getting a lot of data from set, basically. So any information that I could log, I did, and at the time, all these links are dud. I've actually cancelled my Dropbox account, so I'm not worried about you seeing that. I've got lists of all the scenes, some notes that came through. There's some missing sound on that shoot day that had to be fixed, and audio couldn't be found. Turned out they didn't record it, so all kinds of issues. We had duplicated file names on this day, so I've noted that I've added a prefix to the camera clip before I've transcoded it, since it all has to be unique. All kinds of stuff. This is just sort of to give you an idea as to how it was used in the end, and to see a live one. So let's take a look at the scene breakdown. So, here's my scene breakdown for NORTHSPUR. If you have watched my videos where I talk about color coding and how I color code the scenes by a character, then you can see that I've done that here as well. So this is the coloring that I had mentioned as per the character. So yellow is where Kellen and Melinda were together. They were the two. They were two of the leads. There's sort of three main characters. Pink is when Melinda's on her own, and green is Summers. Orange is Summers and Kellen. And I don't think there were any other unique colours. I had also divided the film up into sections. I called them edit codes, but it's intro, spark, leave. Basically like 1 or 2 word summations of each chunk of the story. So that we could speak to this section, and I could export just this section. Where a sort of beat had began or ended. It can be a useful thing to speak to and to show them as an example. Because that you might really want to work on the intro for ages. So several versions and iterations of the film, it'll only be that part that's changed. It's handy to break them up and give them names. Now, normally there won't be so many. I mean, how many have I made here? I've made 22. Yeah, that's a bit, extravagant. But quite often you'll have, you'll break a feature film into reels, which will be about, 15, 20 minutes each, 20 minutes tops. Those will be your sections. You can break it up further in the edit, like I've done here, if it helps. But you'll definitely break it up into at least those reels, because sound facilities and stuff like that, they tend to require it, because it really helps them to break it down into chunks. But as a helpful hint, when you do this, you want to break these up, whether it's for your edit chunks or it's for your reels. You want to break them up into sections where it comes to a natural beat in the story, begins and ends, and you don't want any music overlap or really any sort of sound overlap. You want a sort of neat finish and then something else is starting, so that you can export just that section for people to watch. Especially since for sound, for the reels, it's going to be sent to them in those sections, and you don't want any sound going over the cross of the reels. Anyway, sorry, going off on a tangent again, but I figured for the Patreon viewers and sort of these little tidbits of knowledge, I'd leave in these tangents since, you've came to Patreon, so you must be at least partially interested in what I'm saying. And I had tried some other things here that I didn't necessarily keep with. I think NORTHSPUR was sort of the first time I had used a spreadsheet, to a more, detailed level, since it was my first big cutting project. So I had noted the edit time of each section, and then I was updating it for a while as I went. But this turned out to be a lot of work because I was already editing the thing as it is, which is a full-time gig, so I couldn't always be doing that. But it was a good thing to note for like a scene of, if there was something missing like this, and there was a flashback of young Kellen that they had mislabeled and put on the wrong drive. It turned out it had been shot, but they hadn't sent it to me. This one, I was just noting that there was a bunch of issues with coverage here, and we're going to have to work around this. It's just where you'll put your notes. Sequence assemblies. So those different chunks that I was talking about, that was where I had done my initial assemblies. So I had download links to all of these. I didn't like to just assemble as a scene, because those are kind of pointless, because in film and TV, scenes are sort of divided up when a character moves from one location to another. So if two people are continuing a conversation, they move from inside the house to outside the house, it's two different scenes, but in reality, it's the story's continuing, it's one scene. So I break it up into chunks of stories within the film, and I had an edit code for each of these, so NORTHSPUR 01, 02, 03, and I gave them all a name, and I did my initial assemblies of all those chunks up online for the directors to watch. And then from there, I've removed them now, but I had frame IO links down here, lots of links and links and links, details of each link, just like the other spreadsheet we looked at, the data I'd uploaded, file name, and the duration. Duration's always minus the ID board. Now it says an hour, 50 minutes there, and you had heard me say earlier that it ended up being 90 minutes. We had delivered the film as an hour and 50 minutes to a distributor. It was online, sound mixed, outgraded, everything. And then they came back and asked for a timing change. So that was a rush job later on where the spreadsheet wasn't involved. When I had delivered that at the time, that 1 hour 50 minute cut, that was the lock cut. I've sort of removed all other links at this point. with the exception of that one. And I don't mind that link. And I don't mind that link still being there since it's defunct anyway. But that sort of gives you an overview, I think, of how these spreadsheets are used, and hopefully you might agree how they can be very useful. If there's even a scene that you're trying to track down the footage for that you can't find, maybe in your Avid and in your sync clips, you don't have any footage from, scene 4, for example. You could go to your data sheet and look in here and see if scene 4 comes up anywhere, and then, okay, it was supposedly shot on day 6, okay, so let me go through and I'll check the source rushes for day 6, because I'm putting this information in through like call sheets and continuity reports, camera reports, whatever I could get my hands on in terms of documentation. And it gives me a record of what was shot then. It just sort of all collated in a way that I think and is logical for me and is sort of tailored to post rather than all that BS that you get from, set. I'm sorry, it's not BS. It's not at all. It's just I feel like particularly call sheets and a lot of the other stuff that you get from set is tailored towards the people shooting and production for their tracking. But the formatting of it and the data that they present isn't always the most useful to us in editorial. So this is much more useful to me for keeping track of it all and for referencing later and finding information later on. So yeah, hopefully this is something that you found useful. And I will be making a version of this available to you guys. I'll make a blank template out of the Whistle My Lad one. And I hope that at least one of you finds it useful on your projects with your cutting and tracking and anything else. But again, thank you very much for watching, guys. Thank you very, very much for being a part of the Patreon community. I really, really do appreciate it every time, honestly. It's just the fact that all these tutorial videos still came about as a joke between another assistant editor friend of mine and seeing where it's led to, and all the amount of time that I put into it now is quite amusing. But it's very humbling and awesome that people have come to Patreon and pay money to watch this stuff. So thank you very much, really. And I hope you all have a very Merry Christmas and enjoy the holiday season. And there'll be plenty more videos coming in the new year. See you guys.